Welcome to Uncommon Knowledge. I'm Peter Robinson. Born in 1932 in a Chicago suburb, Donald Henry Rumsfeld has served as a pilot in the United States Navy, as a member of Congress from Illinois, as ambassador to NATO under President Nixon, as White House Chief of Staff, and then Secretary of Defense, the youngest Secretary of Defense in history under President Ford, as Chief Executive Officer and Chairman of the Pharmaceutical Corporation G.D. Searle & Company, and as Secretary of Defense once again, and this time as the oldest Secretary of Defense in history under President George W. Bush. Now chairman of the Rumsfeld Foundation, Mr. Rumsfeld is author of the new book, Known and Unknown, which, as we sit here taping today, is #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. Would that be the first good item you've ever received in the New York Times?
Don't you know it's driving them crazy?
The proceeds from this book go to whom?
They go to the troops and their families, and to the children, and to the wounded, and to the children of the fallen.
You have a book here of some 800 pages. It quotes extensively from memoranda and other documents. If I, reading a paragraph, say, I wonder what the wider context was, what do I do?
You can go to a website. We've digitized a major fraction of my archive, and it's rumsfeld.com. And you can go and go from the quote to the endnote right to the document and read the entire document that's in there. These are documents that, for many cases, I wrote, other people wrote, and what they do is they tell the story. They explain how decisions are made, what was going on, what was the back and forth. And I think a person seriously interested in government and history will be able to go in there and actually come away with a sense of the complexity of the issues and the decisions.
The title of the book is Known and Unknown, and this, of course, comes from your remarks, which instantly became famous at one of your press conferences.
Yes.
Well, you go ahead and explain what you said.
Well, I basically said the truth, that there are known knowns, the things we know we know. There are known unknowns, the things we know we don't know. But there are also unknown unknowns, the things we don't know we don't know.
Right.
And they're the dangerous ones. They're the ones that can get you.
And one of the aspects of the book I found striking is that so much of it, the terrorist attack of 9/11 is unprecedented. The notion on November 10th that terrorists might fly airliners into buildings was an unknown unknown. It simply wasn't in anyone's consciousness. It wasn't a thought. Much of the book is groping toward what can we know, what should we be worrying about, and watching large organizations cope with that. Known and unknown, let me quote you, Mr. Secretary. I remember observing to those with me early that afternoon. You're in the Pentagon, an airplane has struck on 9/11. I remember observing to those with me early that afternoon that America's prior history in responding to terrorism had not been effective. And you put down here a litany. Letting Libya's Muammar Gaddafi off for his role in the 1988 bombing of Pan Am Flight 103, the first World Trade Center attack in 1993, the plotted assassination of George H.W. Bush by Iraqi agents the same year, America's retreat under fire in Mogadishu in 93, the Khobar Towers bombing in Saudi Arabia in 96, the East Africa attacks on the East African embassies in 98, the 2000 attack on the USS Cole. You name there terrorist attacks that took place during every administration from Ronald Reagan to Bill Clinton. It's not a partisan comment. It's a comment about the United States and its what? Its level of conscience. Why was the record so appalling until that moment on 9/11?
Well, it didn't happen all at once. Most of it was outside the United States. And in no instance was anything like 3,000 people killed, innocent men, women, and children. It's the old story about frogs in a water, and if you turn the heat up just a little bit at a time, they end up dying, but they never jump out.
Right.
Whereas if they jump in something hot, they'll jump out. And this happened over a sustained period of time. We got adjusted to the changes in temperature, if you will, and it was to our great misfortune that we had a failure of imagination. We didn't anticipate what we might have anticipated.
Afghanistan. We attack on October 7th. This is just weeks after 9/11, and by December 16th, you're able to make the first of your many visits to Afghanistan, to a liberated Afghanistan, as you say. From at least Grant on, the military forces of the United States have depended on mass and materiel. And in Afghanistan, you and those working with you planned and executed the projection of power halfway across the globe, overturned a sitting government. We'll talk in a moment, as we must, about things that went wrong. But it's worth noting that this was an astonishing operation. How did the Pentagon pull that off when it ran against so much of the grain of American military tradition?
I think a lot of credit goes to General Franks, to General Daly, who was head of the Special Forces people, to George Tenet, because of this very close relationship that was developed between our Special Forces, our combatant commander, and the Central Intelligence Agency. And because we had the advantage of some militias on the ground, the Northern Alliance forces that had been fighting the Taliban for years and been notably unsuccessful. Mm-hmm. And the combination of all of that creatively leveraged everything that needed to be leveraged for success. And I don't think there ever was a time when a major military operation used special forces as the spear point, where they were what was used to accomplish it. And it was thanks to the Northern Alliance, and they did a lot to win. But it was the combination of our Air Force, our naval power, and the ability to put people on the ground, special operations people who could use laser pointers on the Taliban, on the Al-Qaeda, and bring in air power to move them out, and then the militias to occupy the ground.
And how did the speed, the agility, the lethality of that attack in Afghanistan condition thinking about Iraq?
Oh, I don't know that it did.
You didn't?
No, notably different situation. We didn't have the indigenous forces like the Northern Alliance or the Pashtun tribes on the south, the militias on the south that helped. Saddam Hussein had a formidable sized army, which was not the case with the Taliban. They had an army, but it was not anything like Saddam Hussein's. Quite different circumstance. I mean, it was much more conventional, the Iraq effort.